Hello and welcome back to another coding session with Mr. Jacob. This is part 6 of our Neovim from Scratch series where we are configuring Neovim from zero to a full-blown IDE experience. And as you can already see in the file that is displayed in my Neovim setup here, which I created with you, by the way, in the sessions before this one, we are kind of nearing the end of this series because there is only one position on our list still being there, that is blink-cmp. And blink-cmp actually is the solution that we want to use for all things autocomplete. We want to autocomplete something like a path, done. We want to autocomplete something like a variable, done. We want to complete something like a function or anything else, done. And blink-cmp can help us with all of that. So without further ado, let's quickly get a hook into what actually blink-cmp is. And let me try and explain to you where the difference is to something that you might have heard before, which is nvim-cmp. Blink-cmp is actually the new kid on the block, so to speak. It's the new contender in all things auto-completion in Neovim. The de facto standard until now was nvim-cmp, and a lot of different plugins evolved just around nvim-cmp, and it was used for quite some time. Then there came along blink-cmp, which actually just 1 hour ago, when we are recording this video, actually released its version 1. Until now it was in beta. It worked quite well. I have used it for quite some time now for all of my Neovim work. Nevertheless, it was still in beta, and now we have the first stable release. So it's an awesome time to make and release this video. Thanks to everybody involved with blink-cmp. The reason why blink-cmp mainly was created was that nvim-cmp can kind of be a little bit slow. And blink-cmp, that's why the name has been chosen, blink, should be as fast as possible while still presenting you with as many options as possible. This is achieved partially by having a fuzzy matcher in the background, which is actually written in Rust, that is really, really fast and doing all of the matching in the background. And yeah, you heard right, it's fuzzy matching. So it's not matching the exact strings that you are typing, but it's trying to present you with solutions that even might pop up correctly if you have mistyped something, which can be really a blessing. So before I'm now going on and talking about different sources and how we can actually integrate everything with that and compatibility layers and key mappings and all of that stuff, let's first of all install this into our Neovim. We are therefore going to the documentation here, which is quite good, by the way. So if you have any questions or configuration related issues with blink-cmp, always take a look at this configuration website. It can usually help you out. So we are taking a look at installation, scrolling down, and as always finding our plugin manager there that we are using, which is Lazy Nvim. So as this is one of the more modern ones, you usually can, for every new and sophisticated plugin, find an introduction there on how to use it with Lazy Nvim. So for now we are just copying this whole plugin definition here and entering this and then talking in detail about what's actually up with this thing and what it does. We are going somewhere into our plugin directory and just creating a new file here, which we call blink-cmp.lua. We save here to tell our oil file manager that we want to create that file, and then we are simply returning the Lua table that we just copied here from the internet. So let's take a quick look at that. First of all, as always, we have the plugin definition here where Lazy should actually get that one and install it from. We have a dependency here. This is a list that we will actually add quite a couple of other things to while this video is running here. But for now, we simply have friendly snippets. Friendly snippets actually is a plugin which provides you with, as the name says, friendly snippets. I usually do not use a lot of snippets, but you may use that, or you just may comment it out if you do not want to use snippets. Then there is this version tag, and I need to tell you something about this version tag, which actually is documented here, but nevertheless I want to tell you. If you have just a star in here, it will actually use the current development version, which means that it will try to build this Rust fuzzy matcher companion that I talked about on your system from the development sources, which means you need to have a full Rust development stack on your system installed and ready to be used. Otherwise, it's no problem. However, as we have now our first stable release here, I think we should just use the stable release version here. And yeah, as I've said, you do not need, or I didn't say that specifically, you do not need to compile that because there are pre-built binaries. So if you specify a specific version here, like for example, the 1.star or a specific other version, like for example, 1.00, then you will actually get the pre-built Rust binaries, which are available automatically for nearly every architecture and system. So you don't need to actually worry about that. So I would usually for now just leave it at this version tag here and everything will be fine. Then we have some options regarding keymaps. We will talk about that later in this session. Then we can configure our appearance. We will quickly talk about that later as well, but however, as appearance is quite a personal taste, I will only tell you where you can actually find information on how to customize that and not how to customize it, because that's up to you and how you like it. We will definitely talk about the documentation completion as well as signature completion, which isn't even mentioned here. That will follow in a second. But here's our first really important part of this configuration, and that is completion sources, because we want to take our auto completion from some different places and some different positions. Like for example, LSPs are always a good thing that can provide code insight and code intelligence for us. So it can provide us with neat auto completions. So we have LSP, so the language server protocol, as a source here, and we will need to do something else for that to work in a second, which we will see. However, that's our first source. Then we have path completion, because it is always a good idea to be able to complete paths on your system. If you require a file, or if you need to edit something at a specific position and something like that, it's always a good thing to just autocomplete from your file system. Then we have the already mentioned snippets, and then we have buffer completion. And buffer completion simply means that it takes all of the different tokens from the buffer you are currently in. So kind of the words from your current buffer. So the file that you are in, and autocomplete all of them. So if you have somewhere in a comment or a string or somewhere else a wording that you need, for example, later on for a variable definition or somewhere else, you will have autocompletion for that, which is quite nice actually. There are people out there who don't like this behavior, then you can simply remove this here from the sources list and you won't have buffer completion anymore. Okay, the last thing here we can simply ignore. It's just telling you that it is using the Rust variant of this fuzzy matcher, where there is a Lua implementation for fallback. Nevertheless, you do not really want to use that because it's a lot slower. So, okay, let's go ahead and just install this for now. So I'm just exiting out of Neovim, I'm restarting it, and now lazy.nvim is installing blink-cmp. And without me doing now anything else but just configuring this one, you see that I already got an autocompletion here. So if I, for example, type the words IN, I already get a completion match, and that is the buffer completion that I talked about. A completion match on every word in this buffer here, which has somewhere in it the letters IN. And it will even go as far as matching them in a fuzzy manner, even if they are not directly coincidental to each other. So as you can see, it ranks the matches, of course, like first of all the ones that are starting with it, then the ones that are closest to the beginning, and so on and so on. So there is quite the sophisticated matching behind that routines, which make it mostly so that you are just actually matching what you were what you wanted to match. So that is already working, which is quite nice. However, the LSP matching there might not yet work properly. And that has something to do with a part that we kind of commented out for a good reason, but commented out while we did our LSP configuration. So let's first of all go back into the documentation here of Blink where this is explained, and then I will show you the corresponding part in our configuration and the way to adapt it in our configuration. So what we actually need to do, at least with Neovim 0.10 and below, as 0.11 did some quite sophisticated changes within the LSP configuration there, so this is not needed then anymore. But with 0.10, which we are currently using here, we need this configuration. And what we need to do is the following thing. If we have an LSP server, it is actually initialized and a list of capabilities is communicated back and forth between the client that is actually using the server, so our Neovim, and the server itself. So the server actually tells Neovim which capabilities it has, so what it can actually do. If it, for example, can give you a list of symbols, or if it can format a file and stuff like that. And Neovim, on the other hand, tells the server what capabilities it has. For example, if it understands something like a list of symbols for autocompletion, or if it actually can handle certain messages that the server could send while analyzing a file. So they are kind of doing this handshake and creating this set of features or capabilities that both sides understand so that they can then communicate based on that. And Neovim by default does not support this sophisticated kind of auto-completion features. That is only done by blink-nvim or nvim-cmp. And therefore, we need to extend the capabilities list that is actually sent to the server by the capabilities that we now have on top of the usual Neovim capabilities by using the blink-cmp plugin. And that is actually what happens here. So the blink-cmp plugin has this functionality, which is called get LSP capabilities. And you can put in there a list of already ready capabilities, for example, the ones that Neovim has by default. And it will then combine its own capabilities with the capabilities that you have given into that and give you a new list, which is then complete with all of the capabilities that Neovim supports, as well as blink-cmp on top supports. So copy this one. So we're copying this one line because that's the one that we need. We are going back and we are going into our LSP configuration. And if I now search here for capabilities, which I can never write, capabilities, and I, of course, mistyped capabilities. Okay, then we are at this position. And this is where I the last time commented out this line here. So let me quickly just have this search here go away. Okay. So this is the line that I commented out the last time, which essentially did the same thing that I was just talking about, just for nvim-cmp. Because as you remember, we used this file here based from kickstart-nvim and then modified and adapted this to our needs to have a little bit more easy entry point into all of the LSP configuration. And kickstart-nvim simply uses nvim-cmp. So it had the corresponding lines here for nvim-cmp. So what we need to do now here is we have already the capabilities here, which are created here and are taken from this make client capabilities, which is actually the list that Neovim by default supports. So what we want now is we want another capabilities, and we will rename the first one in a second. So what we want here is now we want local capabilities. And we actually want to use what we copied there from the internet. So essentially what we want is we want to tell blink-cmp now, get me the LSP capabilities using the basic capabilities that we already here fetched, and combining them with my own so that I have a full list of capabilities. So let's maybe call those original capabilities. And then let's simply rename this one as well here, so that we now have original capabilities, and our capabilities variable here is now a table of all the capabilities that we support Neovim-wise as well as blink-cmp-wise. And then down here somewhere, let me search for that, capabilities. We are using this capabilities list to actually then set up the LSP. So then we are sending this combined list to the language server to tell it what we can actually do. And if it supports the corresponding counterpart, it will simply give us the corresponding information. So now we save that file again. Let's not save the README file here because we just changed that for testing. And now we could, for example, already go to maybe our Rust test project that we had here. Okay, nice. So if I now, for example, do something like std io, you can already see it knows the namespaces, it knows the packages, and so on and so on. And I have all of that stuff here that I could now, for example, create. I could, for example, now complete the buff reader here. So now I have a buff reader, and I could complete the new, and I can then put something in there. And you can already see that all of this code intelligence and auto-completion is already working because the LSP is now providing us with all the needed information. However, another thing that I can do, which is thanks to the LSP and to this completion integration, so that, for example, the LSP is informed once an auto-completion is done, something neat is here. So, for example, if I just tell it that I want a buff reader, it tells me, okay, there is this buff reader thing. So I could do something like reader equals buff reader, and it tells me, okay, this is in the namespace std.io and it's called buff reader. If I now autocomplete that, you can see that it not only autocompleted that, but it automatically added the import. And this is due to the fact that now the LSP and the autocompletion are just working together. And that is why we needed to configure that. Okay, so now we already have auto-completion for like 95% of all of your use cases, I would say. I usually don't need much more. So let's get back to our Blink configuration and let's see what next steps we can take. So we are going back to Blink, and therefore we need to, of course, go out of our Rust example here and somewhere into our plugins where there is this blink-cmp. I already told you that I want to talk with you a little bit more about this Keymaps. So let's get back to the Keymaps here. In Neovim, by default, the auto-completion is has a different key mapping than with most other IDEs, where it is usually like tab or enter or something like that. In Neovim, you usually have this completion, or that's at least the default with blink-cmp and nvim-cmp as well, I think. You are using Control Y as auto-completion key, which is kind of a thing that you can actually get used to. I actually transitioned from my time before Neovim, which was VS Code, quite easily into using the Control Y in Neovim and using Control B, Control P and Control N for previous and next to navigate within the list. You can use, in most situations, actually the cursor keys up and down as well. So if I do something like I type, I don't know, keymap here, which, okay, it now doesn't present me with that because it already has such a key here. So let's remove that and let's just start it. You can see keymap here. If I now press Control N, it will go just down, and N again and again. It starts at the top. I can just Control P to do previous, and I can use the cursor keys as well. So this works quite well. And then I can press Control Y to actually autocomplete that again. And you can actually get used to that pretty quickly. And this is kind of the Neovim way to do it. So you could either do that, or you could choose one of the other predefined presets here, which would be super tab, for example. That is mostly the same as VS Code. So if you are from VS Code or coming from VS Code, you don't want to learn new key bindings there, or you first of all want to get going with what you know already because you have the needed muscle memory there. Just to choose super tab and just try it. You could use enter, which is something that I had kind of configured a long time back in some IntelliJ IDEs. If I remember correctly, it was kind of that I accepted the auto-completion with pressing enter. Or you could even do none and then configure all of the key mappings for yourself exactly the way that you want. And there is a very good documentation about key mappings telling you more or less everything that you need to know, every kind of command that you could bind to at least any key that you want. So what I am usually doing is I'm usually using the default. However, as I am on a German keyboard with a German keyboard layout, I have actually the problem that my Z and my Y are interchanged. So it's kind of breaking my fingers pressing Control Y. And therefore I want to be able to accept completions with Control Z as well. By the way, is it called Control Z? Is it Z or Z? Because I have now heard both. I have heard Z for this letter, as I've heard Z for this letter, and I'm not 100% sure what is right. Maybe it's a thing of that it's on one hand it's American English, and then it's Canadian English, and then it's maybe British English or something like that. But if you know, please tell me in the comments, is it Z or is it Z? And then maybe tell me where you are from and how you know that, because there may be a difference there, and I'm really interested in that. Okay, back to the topic at hand. I usually create a specific extra binding to the default one, which simply allows me to autocomplete using Control Z as well, because then it will be in the same position and it will be easier to press for me with actually two hands on my split keyboard. So we can easily do that by simply specifying that we want a mapping on Control Z or Control Z, however this is actually named, and then we want actually the action to accept something. So we go back to our documentation and we see here that there actually is an accept action which accepts the currently selected item. Nice. And there is something else. There actually is, and this is something that you need to know, but it's good to know. There is fallback. And if you have fallback as a second action, it will actually make sure that if there is nothing to accept and you press that key combination, it will just fall back to the original key that actually was defined for that mapping, so that you could actually kind of have both. So what I want to do here is I want accept, and then I want to have fallback. So if there is something else defined on Control Z, I just want to call it as well as I have once I have accepted that one. So that's actually everything that I need. And now if I'm going out of this one here, and I seem to have an unnamed buffer there, and I'm going back into blink-cmp here, into the Keymaps, where are we? Keymap there. And I now, for example, autocomplete that again, and I now press Control Z. You can see down here below there, Control Z, it auto-completed as well, and everything is neat and tidy. So if you need specific keymaps, just take a look at that list and define them just like you want them, like you need them, like I did here with Control Z, because I just have a different keyboard than most of the usual Neovim users. Okay. So we have talked about keymaps. Let's skip appearance for now, or let's maybe talk quickly about appearance. You can actually change the appearance of this menu quite a lot. You can transform, for example, those entries. You could change the icons that you see before here. You could change the coloring. You could just change a lot. Most of it just depends on your color scheme, but you can configure that perfectly to your liking. I usually do not do that because I'm perfectly happy with the defaults. But you can do that. If you need information about all the highlight groups that actually Blink is using to kind of to style things, to color things and stuff like that, the documentation actually is quite good about that. If you need information about how the menus here are actually drawn, you can go to the, where is it? Menu, go to default configuration. Did I click something wrong here? Because yeah, there. Menu draw. So that's actually the configuration which tells the system how to actually draw this menu. And mostly Vim default functions are used for that. So you can actually change configuration quite easily to, for example, draw a round border around that thing. So just to make you see what you could do, I want to quickly show you how my specific configuration, where I changed a little bit, but not many, in my Neovim actually is. So if I go into my Blink configuration, where is it? There. You can see that I have, for example, just changed the borders to be rounded because I like rounded borders around the completion menu there. And that's more or less everything that I did. By the way, I need to definitely update my specific configuration because I'm using a quite old version of Blink here. But as you can see, I did not really change some things. I enabled ghost text. We might talk about that in a second, but I've just changed the borders to be rounded here. And everything else we will talk about in a second. So let's go back to our Blink configuration here. And yeah, let's keep that for appearance now, because that's a very subjective topic and you can just change it any way you like. Okay, so let's talk about this documentation completion feature, which actually I quite like. So I usually have that enabled, and I will show you in a second what that actually does. So I have not restarted Neovim yet, so it's still off. The documentation is still off. So let's assume I create or I call a print here. You can see that I simply typed print and it auto-completed, but it just showed me, yeah, there is print and you can auto-complete that. Okay, perfect. Now I will simply restart Neovim and therefore switch the flag on that I just changed just before that. And if I now go ahead and type in here print and I wait a little bit of delay, which you can, by the way, configure. So that's not a problem that it needs to load something or something. It's just that it's configured to have a display delay. It will actually show you the documentation of the function or the class or the symbol or whatever you are trying to access there. And I actually like that quite much because either I don't really care about completions, then I simply ignore what is written there, or I need the completion to give me some information about what arguments I need to put into the function or what kind of class this thing is that I'm currently trying to instantiate, and so on and so on. So then I actually like the documentation. But of course, that's to your personal liking. So yeah, just enable that or not. You can actually map that to a key binding as well, so that you can only open up the documentation should you need it. I think the default is Control K, but I'm not 100% sure because the usual show me the hover thing stuff is Shift K in Neovim. So I think it's Control K for if you are in auto completion. But yeah, I don't really know that. Otherwise, you can just map it any way you like. So yeah, it seems, no, Control K seems to be signature help, by the way, which is another thing that I want to actually show you. Signature help actually is a neat thing that blink-cmp comes with. And you can enable that to simply show the signatures of functions that while you type them. And they are telling you, hey, this is experimental. So your mileage may vary with that with regards to what language you are actually using. For me, it worked actually quite well in a couple of languages, so I usually have it enabled. So let's simply enable that by copying this signature enable something here and reformatting the file. And now if we restart Neovim, we should already have signature completion enabled. So if we do something here now, have something like foo, for example, A, comma B, comma C, and we have end here, and what should this thing do? Maybe just print the combination of A, B, and C, or something like that. Okay, so now we have this function here, and now we call this function, for example, thanks for watching, and you can already see what is happening there. It shows you the signature of the function, and it tells you where you are actually at while you are actually calling that function. Please like and subscribe. Okay, so that is what function completion does, or what this signature completion does. It simply shows you the signature of your function with available typing, if it is available, and where you are currently in your function signature. So yeah, I usually have that enabled, and just try it out. If you have any problems with it, just disable it, but it's a really neat thing to have. Okay, so now we have a basic Blink setup, as I've said, that now maybe fits 97% of all of your needs. But there may be some specific completions out there that you actually want that are not based on LSPs, or not based on your path, or not based on some snippets, or not based on your current buffer, but something special. So if there is something like that out there, the chances are high that there is a specific completion plugin out there in the Neovim world which can help you with that. So let's take a look what we can actually do there. We are going back here now to the basic repository here of blink-cmp, and there is somewhere a link with community sources. There it is. Okay, so and these are actually all of the blink-cmp based completion sources that are outside of the normal and integrated completions that are available within blink-cmp. And by the way, something like blink rip grab is more or less the same thing than a buffer completion, so completion of wording within your specific open buffer, but just using rip grab across your whole project. It can be sometimes quite nice, but you should set the score, and we will see that in a second, quite low for it to be always at the end if you use it. Nevertheless, there are actually a lot of different plugins which already have been adapted to use Blink instead or in combination with nvim-cmp. What you can do if you have a plugin that only supports nvim-cmp but you want to use it with Blink, we will see later on as well. But first of all, let's take a look at one of the completion plugins and how you install and use it with blink-cmp. So for example, something like blink emoji, because who doesn't want to have emoji completion? Okay, so how will we actually do that? We would, as always, take a look at the lazy nvim installation instructions. And here you can see that we are not installing the blink emoji plugin as a simple and separate plugin, but we are first of all simply installing it as a dependency to our Blink plugin. So let's do that. I told you in the beginning that we would extend our dependencies list here quite a little bit with a couple of more dependencies, and we are now starting to do that. So let's add that here. Let's restart our Neovim, and as you can see, the Blink emoji nvim plugin is already installed now. So let's go back to Blink, because now, until now, nothing has actually happened. We only installed this plugin, but it is not yet enabled. To enable it, we need to somehow add it to the sources, and to be able to add it to the sources, we need to define a so-called provider. So what's actually happening here in the sources list is we are telling Blink to use the LSP provider, the path provider, the snippets provider, and the buffer provider. And the reason why we can do that is because those are integrated providers within Blink. However, this custom plugin there has its own provider, so we need to create a definition which tells Blink how to use this one. So luckily for us, that is documented here as well. So what we need to do is we need to define this providers key in our table here, and then below that, this emoji key defining that provider. So let's quickly take that out there, and then let's talk about what's actually happening there. So no, I don't need the Neovim help, which I unintentionally always open up sometimes. Let's put that there, let's format it, and now let's talk about that. Okay, so now we have a list of providers, and yeah, there may be more than one, of course. So we have a naming here, which is in this case emoji. This, by the way, is the same name that we will use later on in our sources list here. We will do that in a second to actually register and use that provider. Then we have the module name. The module name actually is the thing that is actually required and loaded by Blink and then called upon using a specific kind of API to require and to build up this list of auto-completions that it then needs to match against and all of that. So you can actually write your own blink-cmp providers and autocompleters. And if you would be interested in actually doing that, maybe leave me a comment about that and give me some hints what you would like a completion for, because then we could think about maybe creating together our own a Blink auto-completion provider, just to show you how you could do that with your own completion information to create an auto-completion for nearly everything that you can think of. Then we have a specific name here that is just the internal name of this thing. Then we have a score offset, which actually describes where in the auto-completion list this one should actually be placed. So, and if it has a higher score, it will be ranked higher. If it has a lower score, it will be ranked lower and therefore put at the end of the list. So, for example, certain completions, maybe, as I've said, the rip grab document-wide word completion maybe should be more at the end of the list, because otherwise it would just interfere with other good completions there. Then we can just send different options to the plugin itself, which are perfectly specific to the completion plugin. In this case here, we obviously seem to tell the emoji plugin specifically that we want to insert the emoji. And then we have a function there which is called should show items. And should show items is actually a Lua function that you could provide with any provider. So everything that is not opts here is a generic provider option, which you can actually read about in the documentation of blink-cmp as well, and it's quite good about that. Should show items is used here to be simply triggered to make sure that we are in a specific file type context, so that we only use this emoji completion, which is triggered by the colon character, only if we are in the git commit message file type or in the markdown file type. Because if we are writing maybe Rust, then if we would type something like std::io, we would already have completed into the emoji, and that's not very good. So it's not enabled there by default. Okay, so now that we have actually defined this provider here, we simply need to add it to our default sources list here. We therefore use the, as I've already said, the key that we defined it under here in this table. We save that then, and now if we rerun nvim and we go into our README file, I could, for example, do something like, put something like party here, and there's the partying phase. So I could complete that. Or I could something like, how is it called? Ta-da, I think. Ta-da! Yeah, there it is. Ta-da! So let me make this a little bigger for you. Ta-da! Ta-da! We have emoji completion. So it's actually, as you can see, quite easy to actually have a new completion plugin installed within Blink that works quite fine. And as you can see in a second, if I'm going back to my Blink completion here, if I'm trying this here now, you can see that there is no tada, completion. So should I maybe remove that here, the limitation here? So if I now comment out quickly this function here, I save it again, I restart it, I go back into this file here, down maybe here, I don't know. And now I do tada, or parting face maybe, parting face we had before. Wait, what did I do there? Parting face. I think I just pressed Control U instead of Control Z, which sometimes happens. You can see that it now auto-completes here as well, but we don't want that. We only want that in Git commit and Markdown. And even there, not 100% sure if we really want emoji completion, but there may be a reason why you want that. So it's fine. If you want that, just install that, and it's working pretty nicely there. So now let's talk about what if you want auto-completion for something, but there isn't a Blink compatible plugin yet. I say yet because every day more and more Neovim plugins are kind of converted to blink-cmp, because it seems to me that blink-cmp will become kind of the new standard, maybe. We will see. Nevertheless, it's used by a lot of people, and therefore a lot of new completion plugins are written for either blink-cmp or even supporting just both implementations, nvim-cmp and blink-cmp. So what would we do if we had a blink-cmp plugin that we wanted to install, but there is no an nvim completion plugin that we wanted to install, but there is no blink version of it? What would we do? We would use nvim-cmp sources using blink-compat. There is a compatibility layer that kind of translates between Blink and nvim-cmp. You should definitely please only use that if there is no alternative available specifically for Blink, because this one will always be slower and a little bit less good than the ones that are specifically written for Blink, but it will give you the possibility to use nvim-cmp plugins with blink-cmp. And let's take a look at how we can actually install that. Here is an example on how to use that with CMP digraphs. We will not use this one, but another one. But let's check. First of all, you need to install this Blink compat layer as a separate plugin. So let's do that. Let's copy that. Let's go here into our blink-cmp. And now we could actually create another file here, which we could call Blink compat. However, it's kind of part of Blink. So let's actually use another feature that I'm not sure we used before. Let's return a table of tables here, which we can actually do for our plugin files here. So we now have a table of tables, and each of the inner tables now simply represents one plugin. So this way we can actually have a configuration of multiple plugins in one of our plugin files. So it's as easy as that. So what we are just doing here is we are installing Blink compat as a plugin here. So let's go out of that. Let's restart Vim. And as you can see, it's installing Blink compat just fine like that. So let's go back into our blink-cmp and let's go back to the documentation here to see how this actually works. This actually works by, first of all, just adding the source as a dependency for blink-cmp, just as we did with the emoji plugin. So let's now go to the nvim-cmp plugin that I actually want to install, which is cmp SQL, which is, and it's not, wait a second, we did not find that. There actually is, I know that there is nvim-cmp. Okay, is it maybe SQL CMP? Maybe I have misspelled that. I know that there is. Okay, let me quickly check that. nvim-cmp SQL. I know that there is such a plugin out there, nvim-cmp. Let's maybe check. There is a quite big list of those plugins on the nvim-cmp repository. So I think it was in the wiki. Yeah, let's go to the wiki. Yes, there is the list of different sources. Now let's here search for SQL, and there it is. CMP SQL. So RayX CMP SQL. It's essentially just an autocomplete for SQL keywords, which sometimes is quite a good thing to have. So let's just install that because we can easily demonstrate and test that, and it's a quite pretty small plugin. So Ray-X CMP SQL. So we are adding that as a dependency to our blink-cmp. Ray-X CMP SQL. So let's save that for now. Let's restart, and now it should be installed. It is installed. Nice. So now we go back. Thank you, Neovim, into our Blink configuration here. And let's take a look how we need to continue here. So no, that is here, Blink compat. So first of all, it seems that we need to define a provider, just as before, of course. And we have the name of the provider, and then we have the name here. And this is quite important. You need to take here the same name as you would as the source name within your nvim-cmp plugin. So you go to your nvim-cmp plugin, which we will do now here, somewhere where we had this. We will click here and we will see what the name would be. And the name would be SQL. So we need to choose that name for our name in the Blink nvim providers configuration. That is important because it will be used to actually require the corresponding information from this nvim-cmp plugin. So we need to choose that name here. That would be in our case SQL. And more important, the module always isn't the real module because it isn't the blink-cmp module, but it will always be this blink compat source thingy here. So let's maybe just copy this whole section here and then let's adapt that for our SQL plugin. I think that would be the most easiest way to do that. So we already have that emoji provider here. So let's just put just down below that. Maybe I have not put that at the right position. So where does this go? This is the emoji one, isn't it? So this is digraphs. So where does this actually go? It goes to options. So this one goes there. So I simply missed one, I think. So let's see. Yeah, now it formats. Okay, so digraph would be SQL now. The name, as we have learned, is SQL as well. Blink compat source will stay the same because it is the same for all of the compatibility layered resources. The score offset, yeah, we could choose that any way we want, but let's leave it as at -3 here. And options actually are options which will be sent directly to the nvim-cmp plugin. So let's see, maybe this plugin has some options, maybe it does not. It doesn't seem to have any options, so we don't need any options. So let's just remove this. And those are actually now the options that are sent to the nvim-cmp completion plugin there. And now we have defined our provider. We only need to define it here as a source to be used. So let's restart Neovim. And if I now go into my README file here, for example, I should be able to have autocompletion for, and you can already see I have select name, comma, or first name, comma, last name, comma, count, let's see, count, address from, there we are, from something. So you can see we have kind of the completion now of the SQL keywords, which is kind of nice, but it's kind of not very usable because we have it everywhere. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's maybe, just maybe, go somewhere here in our temp directory, I think, and we have already a foo SQL file there. What a coincidence. And yeah, as you can see, we have this SQL file here, and I want to only have this completion here now within SQL files. So how could I do that actually? I could do that by going back into our blink-cmp configuration and stealing the should show items function maybe. And as we have here the same blink configuration that we have before, that we have for every plugin, we can kind of just use that and use that only for the file type SQL. And if I now save that, and go now again here into my README file and try to now do something like so. You can see there is no SQL autocompletion anymore. So that's already quite nice. But what is if I go into my full SQL file and I want to do that there? You can see there is SQL autocompletion. Select, self, selective, serializable, JSON serialize, message length, and so on and so on and so on. And that works quite well. And we have just installed an nvim-cmp completion plugin within blink-cmp. And it works just fine. So you can actually do that. So in 99% of the situations, there is no good reason to stay with nvim-cmp, except if you have the personal taste to do so. Then by all means, use nvim-cmp, please. Because that's the whole reason why we are doing all of that stuff in Neovim, because we can choose what we think is best for our development environment. Okay, so let's jump back into our README, because we have just finished configuring, installing, and explaining autocompletion via blink-cmp to you. And therefore, we are at the end of this series, at the end of our Neovim from scratch series. However, don't worry, there will be further Neovim content on this channel. I will do further videos on Neovim. I already have a list with further topics that I want to develop with you, that I want to show you, that I want to maybe experiment on, because that are maybe topics that I never tried myself and I want to do that. Like, for example, writing my own Blink completion source. I've never done that, but that could be fun. So if you would be interested in that, please tell me in the comments. If you have any other further things that you might want to learn about Neovim, that you want to make me show you here on the channel, that might fit this video type of learning and teaching thing, then just leave me a comment and I will take a look at that. I will think about that. I will try to make it into a video. I will put it onto my to-do list, and then we can actually talk about that in the future. I would really love to hear from you what you would be interested in. Nevertheless, I am really enjoying my coding streams and my live coding sessions on this channel as well. So I will continue those as well. I don't want to only do Neovim content. So I will try to find a balance between my live coding and the Neovim content on this channel, because both I have fun doing, and I only want to do here actually what I really have fun doing, because yeah, nobody is actually paying me to do this. So I'm just doing that for my own fun and for you as a community, because I really much enjoy the interaction with you, and I really much enjoy having the feedback from you that you learned something, that you had fun following me, and I get that feedback from my coding videos as well as my Neovim coding, my Neovim sessions. So I will do both in the future, and we may even be able to combine both by, for example, doing some live coding within Neovim, developing some sort of plugin, developing some integration. And as I've said, I have already quite some topics on my list for Neovim in the future, like, for example, some plugins. I want to do a certain plugin development already with you. I have on my list, I want to actually develop the project nvim's telescope selector. If you have followed the series, you might remember that there is actually in project nvim, which we are using, a selector to select recent projects, but it is for telescope. And as we are using FZF Lua, we can't use that. Nevertheless, I actually want to write our own custom FZF selector, kind of mimicking the feature set and the display of the project NVIM telescope selector, and create it as our own plugin, so that we can actually kind of publish and use it and learn how to make plugins and FZF selectors in the same at the same time. Furthermore, I want to definitely deep dive into the topic of doing all kinds of testing integration with DAP and so on within Neovim. Not testing, debugging, sorry. Testing is another thing that I want. I want, of course, take a look at testing and testing framework integrations into Neovim. And all those are topics that I want to take a look at and that I want to cover here in the future. So there is a lot to come, but I will, as I've said, try to balance that with my coding videos. So if you have specific wishes, don't hesitate to tell me in the comments. Nevertheless, if you liked that video and if you liked the whole series, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell next to the subscribe button to be informed once the next video is out. And as always, you may always comment on my videos, which is great because I like the interaction with you as a community, and the YouTube algorithm likes comments as well. So that's always a nice thing you could do for me if you want to, just to bump up my videos a little and give them a little bit more visibility. Then I have to say thank you. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for being part of this community. You are great. Your feedback is awesome. And yeah, you actually keep me going making these videos. And now I have to end with my usual. I hope that you had fun as much as I did while this video lasted and while you watched it. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.